Cool. So typically the one we like to study a lot is the current account because it's the largest of
Okay.
the three. Um, because it's made simply because it's made up of all your goods and services that are being traded.
Mm-hmm.
So you can end up with current account surpluses,
Mm-hmm.
which means you're making more money than you're spending.
Okay.
If you have a deficit, it means you're spending more
Yeah.
than you're earning.
Mm-hmm.
Clear?
Yeah.
So far. So what we tend to find in the UK is that we have a surplus on services
Mm-hmm.
because we're a service-based economy.
Yeah.
So
We're not like producing like, I don't know, like clothes or cars or anything.
or PPE,
Yeah.
which we desperately need. So we have a surplus on services, but we have a deficit on goods.
Okay.
The net um the net effect impact is that we actually have a deficit, our
Okay.
current account. You can imagine that the value of goods is probably will be higher because people need more goods than typically they need services. And the only
Yeah.
kind of services that we really provide are financial services.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is why it's a big problem. This has the fact that we have a current account deficit has implications for our finances as a nation. So because we're spending more on imports than we're making on exports, the deficit can become quite large over time,
Okay. Yeah.
which then means we have to finance that deficit. So what do we mean by financing? Well, picture this. Imagine that you have £100, but you're spending £120.
Uh-huh.
So that means you have a deficit of £20, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you cover that deficit?
You borrow and then you
Borrow
pay
money.
it.
Right. So you're
But doesn't
borrowing
the
money.
government also have like a massive debt that they still have to pay off every year? Like it's like something like it's part of the government spending. It's like 50 billion just to keep their debt at bay.
That's just the interest.
Yeah, that's what is interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you're borrowing. So that's good. So that links into the concept of national deficit
Mm-hmm.
and national debt. So
Yeah.
your national deficit or your fiscal deficit is what you're spending above what you're making.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not spending more, you have to borrow that money and you're
Mm-hmm.
paying interest on it. So because you're not borrowing money, that's now called debt, which is where
Mm-hmm.
we get national debt from. That debt pile will continue to grow if you continue to run a deficit
Okay.
because it means you're having to constantly borrow. So, for example, going back to the example of you earning £100 but spending 120,
Mm-hmm.
let's say this is year one. So, in year one, you borrow £20. In year
Mm-hmm.
two, you're still running a deficit. So, you have to borrow another £20.
Mm-hmm.
So, now you owe £40 in total plus interest.
Ooh.
So now you're getting the picture of how this can quickly spiral out of control. And usually what governments try to do first is just make sure they're making enough or earning enough to pay the interest. And then eventually they need to reduce their deficit and eventually get to a surplus in order to pay off that debt.